Hey everyone, Rach here. Today I'm going to talk about a movement to help mobilize the low back and the hips a little bit. This can be a really great movement if you're feeling any stiffness, pain, tension in the low back. But in general, this is a really good movement to do in the mornings, at night before you go to bed, and to incorporate it with some of your breath work. So you're going to come down to the floor. And we're going to be moving the pelvis in 3 planes of motion. So this whole exercise is called the pelvic clock. So imagine you've got a clock sitting on your pelvis. So we're just going to start by tilting the pelvis forward and back. So basically to a 6 o'clock position and to a 12 o'clock position. Just oscillating the pelvis back and forth. So you're basically trying to create space under your low back here, and then you're tucking your tail under to squish that space to come into what we call an imprint. The breath for this one is going to be an exhale to tuck the tail and an inhale to lift. Notice I'm not getting this movement from the ribs, so I'm not letting the ribs flare or move too much. This movement is really just coming from the pelvis, so I'm keeping my ribs knitted together here. Okay, so that's the first plane of motion our pelvis moves in. Second plane of motion is going to be a hip hiking. Okay, so I like to keep my fingers on the bony corner of my hip, thumb on my ribs, and we're coming into hiking one side of our hip up, shortening the waist, hiking the other side of the hip up, shortening that waist. Where you should be feeling this is in your low back. So when we hike that right side, I'm feeling it in my right low back and then my left low back. You might find you have a harder side or a more tender side. So just moving through that, making sure you're not holding your breath with this also. So that's the second plane of movement, the hips move in. Third plane of motion is going to be a rotation, so almost like you're doing the cha-cha. So keeping the hips level on this plane, I'm just going to slightly lift my right hip up so it's higher than my left hip, and then I do the same thing on the other side. The coordination piece of this movement can be slightly tricky, so I'm working more from like a 3 o'clock to a 9 o'clock position. And I'm just oscillating the hips back and forth. My legs and my hips are relaxed. Again, this is really just coming from the deeper core muscles, being your back and your lower abdominals. Okay, we're going to put all of those movements together into a full pelvic clock. So like the hands of the clock moving around. So tucking the tail under, moving the pelvis around to one side. I'm now lifting my tail, hiking my pelvis on the other side, and coming back the other way. And I'm just circling my pelvis around, and I'm trying to hit every corner of that pelvic clock. So notice what corners of your pelvic clock you have a harder time rolling through, what parts are sticky for you, and then you would switch directions and do the same thing in the other direction. You can do 5 to 10 in each of those, incorporating your breath work into that, taking it nice and easy, and hopefully will help low back and pelvis feel a little bit less sticky, a little bit less painful. Thanks, see you next time.